Hello, everyone. Welcome to day number 2 of the Hearthstone Grandmasters World Championship. To take you through the beginning of our show, I am Dragon Rider, joined by Sottle. How you doing? You getting ready for day number 2?
I am doing great. An hour before the end of the broadcast last night, I thought I'd be coming in fresh, rehabilitated. You know, there's 6 of us here for this event. We get to share the workload a little bit. And then whatever you want to call last night happened. If you haven't seen the final game of the day from last night, genuine, no hyperbole, an all-timer game of competitive Hearthstone. People are already making the meme compilations and the clips. It's already hitting the YouTube upload compilations. I know Clark has put it in a highlights video as well recently. Like, it is an absurd game of Hearthstone that you owe it to yourself to go back and watch. But do that after the next several hours of competitive Hearthstone, because hopefully we can at least try and match some of that level of hype today, because today we are going through our remaining players and trying to crown ourselves a world champion for 2023.
Yes, we are. But we have to talk about the way that they'll be playing those matches in order to get to that point. So let's take a look just once again to recap our format for this tournament. It is Conquest, as all of the tournaments this year have been. That means all of these players have brought 4 decks, and they have to ban one of those decks. Can't win with the same deck twice, so you got to get a win with each of those other 3 decks in that best of 5. We have seen the spectrum, I think, of 0 wins to going all the way to game 5. So it's going to be an interesting one, but they are playing those best of 5s to get all the way to the end, Sottle, to get that beautiful, beautiful trophy.
There it is. That's what all of these remaining players and the players who were unfortunately eliminated yesterday were coming into this tournament looking to get their hands on. I think you are right. I think there has been a real lineup diff in this tournament so far. I think just in stark contrast to the series that myself and Lorinda cast last night. I know you had the pleasure of just seeing one of those series where Pocket Train just goes, nah, I'm just better than you, and just absolutely annihilates other people in about half an hour total. I think a huge part of that is down to the lineup that Pocket and Meaty have put together. They do seem to have one of the strongest sets of tools at their disposal.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll recap that day yesterday. But yeah, like you said, there was this whole difference. I know for myself, I was laying in bed thinking about this yesterday. I couldn't sleep very well last night either, just thinking about all of this and thinking about the deck differences, as you mentioned, right? We kind of have this really kind of one end to the other kind of spectrum in the decks, the play styles, and you can see even the reactions. Honestly, we had the reactions, as you just saw from Rekvam, of just saying, I am so good at this, and then on the other side, Pocket saying, I'm so bad. And just, we had like the whole range yesterday. It was absolutely amazing, and I think really just kind of encapsulates the Hearthstone experience and the Hearthstone feel altogether. I think it was an absolute amazing day number 1 for our World Championship. And there is our Group A bracket that we did get to see the majority of yesterday. And again, after you saw that, cheering Rekvam going ahead and taking it all the way through Group A. So he will be in our top 4 today. But we are going to be having that decider match between Hemlock and Gyu, which will be coming up next to see who's going to be up against Rekvam. But Subtle, there's also another group.
Yeah, we have split up the format a little bit if you're a little confused as to why we're at this point in the brackets as we're looking at them. We have held these last elimination decider matches to day 2. So we'll be going through Hemlock versus Gyu, and now in Group B you can see where we'll be following this up with Meaty versus CJ Kaka to decide the last remaining members of the top 4, and then we'll be going straight through that top 4 to an eventual winner by the end of the day. But that Group B was really so far dominated by that Pocket Train Meaty lineup, right? You saw Pocket Train have a very easy run with his version of it, and then Meaty playing the same decks got through as well. And then it was only when those two lineups clashed with each other that suddenly we got a real nail-biter of a series that went all the way to Game 5 because the power of the lineup kind of cancelled each other out. So now we get to see Meaty come back into the fray in the second match of the day and see if he can get over the line with the strength of that lineup and, of course, his quality as a player as well. But we are, of course, bringing back one of everyone's favourite features of the broadcast, and certainly mine. It is caster predictions. So why don't you kick us off, Dawn? Who you got?
You know, I gotta go with who I said yesterday. I'm sticking with Pocket Train. I think he is kind of a champion of the people, and I think he's going to be not only just a champion of the people, he's going to be a champion of the game overall. I think he's going to take it all the way today. And one reason for that is the way that I saw him kind of act and his attitude towards his misplays yesterday is also very reminiscent, not only of Firebat, yeah, very reminiscent of Firebat back in 2014 winning Worlds, but also Pocket Train's own performance back in the Summer Championship when he ended up kind of making a misplay and feeling just very down on himself and getting second place at that tournament, which I think the majority of players would say is still very, very good. And he turned that into he turned it into a fall win. So that's why I'm going for it. But what do you think, Subtle? Who you got?
I mean, Control C, Control V. I am going with Pocket Train as well. I think you've said it all. I think Pocket Train's the best player in the world. I think he has, if not the best lineup in the tournament, the second best lineup in the tournament. I think when you put those two things together, he's doing really well. I think you'll see a fair few Pocket Train predictions. And fortunately, there's no Gia here to curse Pocket Train by picking Pocket Train for predictions. So it should still bode well for our hero.
Yeah, well, as you said, there are probably going to be a lot of other people saying Pocket Train as well, but it's not just us through this broadcast today, Subtle. We also have our fellow casters who will be joining throughout the broadcast. So let's bring them in and also get to see their predictions as well. Welcome in, everybody. Let's start with you, Raven. Who do you got? Who you picking? What do you think?
Sorry, I was just distracted by something that flashed up on the screen there, but we'll forget about that, pretend it never happened. For me, I'm going to have to just join in with you guys and just say Pocket Train once again. I generally try to look for someone a little bit different to pick, maybe a different lineup, but I just looked at Pocket Train's lineup, along with Meaty's, of course, and then just saw Pocket Train play. I spoke to him this morning. He said he's didn't get too much sleep or as much sleep as he would have wanted, but he's relying on the adrenaline to carry him through. And I just have faith in his not only his lineup but his quality of play as well. So it's Pocket Train for me.
Well, anyone who knows me knows that I now cannot pick Pocket Train because everyone else is. So I've gone ahead and gone with Rekfem. Thought about Gyu because I maybe like his lineup best, but Rekfem has already made it out of groups at the very least, and still part of that same practice group, but I was really impressed with his ability to take a lineup that he didn't feel confident about going into the event and still managed to take those two wins. And we'll see if maybe he can go the full distance with that warrior. He certainly believes in himself like no one else.
My turn.
It's your turn.
Meat. Meat. The Meat Man. Come on. I mean, you guys are all picking Pocket Train. I'm kind of in a similar boat as Edelweiss where I want to go against the grain just a little bit. I mean, Meaty's got the same lineup. They're from the same country. They have... Okay, they don't have similar results for the year, but I feel like Meaty is going to take it all.
Well,
no rebuttal?
Nothing exciting to add, really. I don't think. We've been blessed in Hearthstone over the years with the world champion often being either the best or the second best, rated player amongst their peers. Pocket Train's the player that everybody thinks should win the world championship this year. He's put the title on his back right from the start. He's been doing the tweets, telling everyone where everything is, what everything's doing. He's carrying this along, and the perfect ending is Pocket Train. So yeah, Pocket Train again, I'm afraid.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving your predictions. Do you need closing thoughts?
I just like how Lorinda's not even happy. Neil's not even happy to pick Pocket Train. He's like, I guess, you know.
I guess I just have
Everybody
to.
else is doing it. It's a good luck.
There we go. And now there's no choice. Everyone has to pay Pocket Train. Well, that's
Right.
what you're going to get.
That's right. Yes. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. And I love hearing these predictions, but we'll get to see all of you again throughout the broadcast. So we'll see you all in a little while. But let's go ahead and start talking about this subtle, which is going to be Hemlock versus Gyu, and kind of talk about what we think is going to happen in this matchup. We're going to talk about the players a little bit and talk about kind of their progression, I guess, from yesterday into today.
Yeah, so we can see some of Hemlock's action here. Hemlock actually got to play Paladin, moving into the side of the bracket that was leaving Paladin up, which was a little bone of contention with some of the casters yesterday, but I think some of these lineups have tilted in the way of letting Paladin go. I talked a lot about little individual card changes that Levick has made to the various decks in his lineup to allow that Paladin to go through. But you can see here from Hemlock in the end just about getting over the line against Levick, sending Levick down into the lower bracket. We've chosen to look at the Nature Shaman here because without a Plague DK to dunk on in this series, Dawn, I think Nature Shaman, even though it's a deck I love, it's a deck I believe in, I think it's a deck with a real skill edge and high degree of agency that, you know, arguably some of the best players in the world who are here should be able to use to the fullest. It is a deck that can seem to struggle and has seemed to struggle once or twice in some of the early series that we saw yesterday, even though we may have got distracted by some of the fireworks towards the end. I think that was a big talking point early on, was the performance of Nature Shaman.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one as well. I know we talked about the kind of, this is one of those decks that we've kind of had throughout a majority of the year, and it's not much different than it was. There's a few little bit of changes. You mentioned yesterday talking about things of like no Lightning Storm inclusion. We now have Miracle Salesman. And yeah, it didn't perform super well. We're going to see, though, if maybe it's able to perform enough today. And because it's Conquest, even if it doesn't perform in all of the games, it just needs to do well in one. So there is a player on the other side, though. Gyu is going to be looking to see if he can actually beat this Nature Shaman and secure his spot in the top 4, because as you mentioned earlier, this is a deciders match. So one of these players will be ending their road here. But this is how Gyu got here, beating that Nature Shaman versus Requiem yesterday. See if you can do it again today.
Yes, indeed. Gyu not really putting in quite the level of performance yesterday that I'd say I've become used to over the course of the year. I'm taking Fury Hunter's word for this, but it's a good person's word to take. There was an alleged missed lethal in one of the earlier games with the Nature Shaman. I believe in the opening mirror. Shaman versus Warrior against Requiem in that series that we were just looking at. But I think throughout the year, Gyu has found a lot of praise from commentators, from viewers, even from fellow pros alike, as just to how well he has performed in the Masters Tours events, and obviously in the ladder to qualify for them in the first place. And I really like this lineup. This is the closest lineup in the field to what I theory crafted to bring to the tournament, which was Gyu's lineup minus Treant Druid plus Naga Priest. That's what I would have ended up bringing to this tournament. So Gyu, just naturally from being the closest as to what I got to, it's a lineup that I'm going to root for. So you'll see, I think Mech Rogue has the real potential to be a sleeper and really try and run through some of those Druids that we're seeing on the other side. However, no Druid to be seen from Hemlock on the other side. So this, to me, is a point where two slightly level 2 lineups are clashing with each other without that level 1 lineup to prey upon, and it becomes a little bit awkward because they sort of cancel each other out to some degree. So there's going to be a lot of minutiae in the games. I think none of these matchups are going to be super blowouts one type of the other. It's not like either lineup's target strategy is like really landed in this series. It really is just going to be decided by a little bit of who can get the good draws, a little bit of who can make the right decisions, and based on what we saw yesterday, who can keep their head in really incredibly high pressure situations, right? Like that is what it's going to come down to a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think that last game of the day yesterday especially encapsulates that, just kind of keeping your head in the game
Yep.
through whatever nonsense happens, and draws as well. I think that was one big kind of storyline that we saw a lot yesterday, whether it was the nature shaman, whether it was the Demon Hunter, especially a little bit in some of those Rainbow Sith Mage games, where there just wasn't the draws. But we're gonna see if these more, maybe this more aggressive Tree and Druid can get the draws, and there is that Demon Hunter on the other side for our first game here. So Hemlock coming in with the mistake. Do we have to mention the turn one mistake, Sottle?
We don't. No. So what I will say is specifically, obviously, you can go check out Fino's Twitter if you want to see the clip that we're kind of referring to. But I will point out, as someone who also plays Tyrander's pre-skin of choice, just because it was the first skin in the game that released that wasn't Anduin, so I just changed off Anduin immediately and never went back. That is the tech that you need, and I did verify with Pocket as well that he specifically plays Tyrander for that tech of just literally saying a mistake every time that you say a mistake. It's very important.
It is wonderful. We are going to see Hemlock just choose to keep the frequency oscillator there, which honestly seems like a pretty reasonable choice. Also picking up the Slither Spear, which is another very good turn one. But Q, off of the Cactus Construct, pulling up a Gold Panner. That's going to get a lot of extra draw for this Treant Aggro Druid.
Oh, yeah. My face when panning. That's what we need.
Wow. Pick up the Wayward Sage for Hemlock does allow him to get really good discounts on these Nagas. It's kind of interesting, though. I did have a consideration of, did he just want to get that Sigil of Time kind of moved over to the left to potentially save? But at the same time, because the Naga, the Wayward Sage, had just come into hand, if you waited any longer to play it there, it would have lost that outcast effect. So Hemlock kind of just had to go in on it.
I think it's a temptation you're faced with in your early days of playing decks that have Wayward Sage in them, even in decks with just Illidari Studies where you discover a Wayward Sage sometimes. It's like, okay, if I can just like wait 1 or 2 turns, then this really important card will move over to the far left. And I've got so many cheap cards in my deck, it'll be fine. I'll be able to play Wayward Sage from the right, it'll be fine. No, it won't. It's never fine. It always gets stranded in the middle of your hand. You just have to jam it in that outcast position from the right as soon as you can in both scenarios.
Yep. And Hemlock being able to clear up both of those gold panels. Yeah, no, good.
No more panning.
Hemlock said, no, we're not allowing this anymore. But even regardless of being able to clear those now, it did give Q multiple extra draws, which unfortunately some of those draws were kind of the top end of the deck, which he's not going to be able to get to yet.
Yeah, it depends how much you want to glass half full that, though, right? Because in a lot of those situations when you draw a bunch of bonus cards and they end up being your top end, you can just say to yourself, well, okay, if I didn't just draw all of those bonus cards, these would be the cards I was drawing for the next 3 or 4 turns of the game, right? And I'd end up doing nothing. So now I've got past that, and now I'm drawing my Splish Splash Whelps, and everything is fantastic.
It is beautiful. And those are buffed as well, which does mean a little bit more work for Hemlock on the other side. I think the decision here for Gyu is really if he does want to commit this Innervate to get one of those Splish Splash Whelps out, which it's kind of like using that Innervate for the extra now to get the extra in the future. It's kind of a half now, half later kind of decision, it feels like. But I don't hate just going in on getting the Splish Splash Whelp out.
So the reason I think it was held there, okay, it looks a little bit sillier now that the second Innervate was drawn. But so firstly, the 3/2s don't actually fight on the board particularly well, right? There's a 2/1, so it doesn't really compete for board that well. And also, this is a deck that really wants to hinge on using Solar Eclipse with potentially very expensive spells, right? So holding on to an Innervate in your hand can actually make that happen very quickly, very explosively if you do get to stick some minions on the board, and quite often, unless the Demon Hunter is going to go off with the super early pop-off with the Sharpshooter, you are going to have some form of minion land on board. So I think with Topior, with Solar Eclipse, and the buff spells as well, like having those Innovates available is a big deal. Like, let's not forget, Topior Innovate kills a Sharpshooter now, right? As an emergency situation, if that's what you need to do later on in the game.
Yep. Yeah, this is a really interesting case too, where I think a lot of the decks, or you might just want to look at this and say, wow, this stuff costs a lot, or I'm not really getting the value I necessarily want, but it's that multi-turn planning. And I think that Topior and the kind of context of his hand really also contributed to that decision. And now we can see that Topior coming down. And as you mentioned, that second Innervate draw, that just allows this. And also not even just being able to clear up a Sharpshooter that's going to come down.
Living Roots is so strong.
Yeah. That's another 0 mana 3/3 rusher on the board, plus removal. Fantastic pickup.
It specifically kills the one minion that you couldn't value trade with this turn as well. So it's such a monstrous swing in terms of stats on the board overall.
Well,
good luck. Chew through that, mate.
Yeah, exactly. The added stats on the board as well, the Topior plus all of those spells, the setup here that you went for, kind of holding that Whelp and then getting to just play them both the following turn, really allowed for this. And even, as you mentioned, like I said, getting to clear the Sharpshooter, yes, but also all of the stats on the board now are just setting up for that Sharpshooter to actually not be quite as effective as what Hemlock would be looking for. But it's turn 5. Hemlock's getting to do his first pop-off here. He did find a lot of these resources, and now it's a matter of, can he keep that going and continue to find these? And a Wayward Sage pickup is not a bad option. But I like this Desperado. Continue to build up that attack, because he's going to push a lot of attack with his face here as well.
Yeah, for sure. Turn actually went really, really great for Hemlock with double through the Felon Flames. The first one coming early enough to be able to cleanly take 3 health off the board before the minions had all absorbed too many shots from the Sharpshooter. The only way this could really have been a better outcome is if he just rolled a bunch of damage to face straight up, because then, as you were saying, like with the momentum draw, double dispose in hand, you only needed a few shots to go face in that spot, and you might just be threatening lethal if you were then to pick up the second momentum alongside as well.
Yeah. Even though Gyu had a really great wide board turn last turn, that board did get cleared up pretty nicely, though, from Hemlock because of that amazing pop-off turn, as you mentioned, just how smoothly it went. And now Gyu has to kind of answer this on the other side. But again, because the setup, now he has this really nice way to answer. He's going to get some healing from the Phi pickup. And again, kind of reestablish that board state because of these whelps off of the Topior and nature spells.
Yeah, so all the way back up now to, what's this, functional 36 health against Sharpshooter, and the only way that you can kind of skip that and just say, no, you're at 18, I'm just going to do 18 direct damage to you, is with face-to-face melee combat, right, which you can't do because of the Phi in the way. So this would have had to have been like a tough crowd, and then even then you're fishing for 18 damage of direct face in your deck, which doesn't really exist at this point, with one momentum being used. So it looks like Yu is in an extremely dominant position here. A lot of it does come down to that Innovate hold, right? Like just the power of that turn due to having the double Innovate and the amount of stats that were able to be dumped on board.
And stats over multiple turns too. I think especially this, that Phi coming down too. It's so difficult, as you said, without something like the tough crowd to put that back in hand. And Hemlock recognized that, went ahead and just threw out the concede. So Yu is going to take that first game. Sottle, how do you feel about the lineup now with that Druid getting that quick win?
Yeah, I mean, I feel great about it, right? Like, the Druid, to me, is the one deck... And honestly, like, I didn't test Treant Druid. It's not, like, something that I tested out and then dismissed. But to me, like, this is the one deck that I'm not certain about because I hadn't put significant testing in it myself. So if you're going to give me that same lineup and take the one deck that I'm not convinced about out of it, yeah, I'm feeling freaking great about this lineup now, Dawn. Like, this has just got the good decks left in it now, as far as I'm concerned. But there are still, of course, questions over that Nature Shaman, which, you know, I have to do my due diligence and point them out, even though I am a big believer in the deck, even though I have very high success rate with the deck. You know, I do not necessarily play against the same caliber of players with the same regularity as these players are playing against in the World Championship. So, Nature Shaman has seemed a little bit exploitable in some spots, and maybe that is a question that still remains to be answered, as it is in both players' lineups.
Yeah, and that is the kind of question I'm curious to see here which deck comes up next for Gyu, if it's going to be that Shaman or if it's going to be that Mech Rogue that we looked at. There is always that debate in Conquest of Q order and if it's random, but these are both decently aggressive. But if there is that consideration of the kind of question mark for the Shaman, I definitely can see it just saying, okay, let's just queue up the Rogue, try to get a quick win with that, and then feel even better going in at a 2-0 with that Shaman.
Yeah, I'm just kind of happy to see more Mech Rogue as well. We haven't seen a great deal of it so far. It's not a super common deck on ladder in my experience either, but I do think it's a little bit under the radar in terms of not overall win rate. I'm not saying it's a good ladder deck that's going to, you know, climb to the moon on through the legend ranks, but when it comes to serving a purpose in conquest style tournaments, when you're looking to target particular other things, make life as difficult as possible for individual decks, I think Mech Rogue serves a very, very useful purpose. It doesn't really hit that purpose in this matchup against Hemlock, or necessarily in this matchup against Demon Hunter. But I think with the amount of Druid that you'd be expecting on the other side, for example, like, if you go Mech into Coppertail Snoop into Coin Innie, like, they're dead. They just don't interact with that in any way. They don't have the cards in their deck really to be able to interact with that. So I definitely think there was a lot of merit in this Mech Rogue bring, and was a little surprised to see as little of it as we did.
Yeah, I definitely also expected to see at least a little bit more of it, because it is still a very, very solid deck. And I think especially in a format, I know you all talked about it a lot at kind of the beginning of the day yesterday, this format where you kind of know the other people that you're playing against, you're very familiar with them, and it is such a small, you know, player. Well, maybe then the number of players impacts the decks that you bring. And if you're not expecting a lot of super slow decks, you want to just get on the board and start getting out with bodies, start hitting them. I think we see that a lot in the Priest. We saw that with some of the, I guess to an extent, this Naga DH. But yeah, I kind of expected a little bit more of this Mech Rogue as well. And we're seeing that immediate discount into the stronger minions, as you were mentioning already. Taunt?
Yeah, not really the one you wanted here. Like, the start, obviously, discount into Mimiron was sick, but the problem is Gyu's drawn all the weird, clunky combo top end of his deck alongside that. Doesn't really have, like, the Spark bots or something to throw out alongside this Mimiron to really go for max value, so I'm imagining you're just going to end up dropping this to protect the Mimiron, just put it on the Magnetic Mech instead. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. I think stealth would have been amazing for him there. It's also a little bit sad to see that Thunderbringer come into hand when he actually kept that Scourge Illusionist in the mulligan as well. It's like that was the one card you didn't want to draw after specifically keeping the Scourge Illusionist. And this Discover choice, a lot of Midnight Wolf showed up yesterday, but you also mentioned the Tough Crowd, which Tough Crowd against some magnetized mechs especially could be very good as well. And it's still pretty early in the game here.
Yeah, so you have to make a decision there, right? Between fighting for board honestly, which you could theoretically do. You have Vicious Slither Spears, which are one of your best early board-based cards, one of your most aggressive early cards. Or just focus on the actual combo turn, right? Because you do have Sharpshooter in hand already. Like Tough Crowd for 2, Coin Hero Power, for example, like wins the board back definitively in this spot. But you'd be using a lot of fantastic resources. You'd be using the coin, you'd be skipping on a Wayward Sage discount. I think that's just too much cost to give away when you do already have that sharpshooter in hand.
Yeah. And
Ooh, hello. Let's do that. Do you know your colors, Dawn?
it's been a little while. They're they changed as well, but
They did change. Yeah.
you know, that just throws us all up. I'm not sure about the lifesteal here being very significant. At least not. Well, there's kind of smaller things on the board, but there is going to be some added stats from these. So just using 2 of them does add quite a bit of stats to the board. And I do think the potential for things like the tough crowd that you mentioned, I do really like Yu's decision to just start splitting up these stats as well. Plus, again, it's kind of spreading those stats out on the board for that potential pop off, especially after seeing that Sage come down, discount stuff. Yu has to be expecting a lot of pop off here, so putting that Divine Shield out to soak up another potential sharpshooter hit seems like a very wise choice.
Yeah, it's such a massive draw though with the buffs and with the Mimiron on board. I was just saying, like, the tools weren't really there to take advantage of that to the fullest. But Sparkbots are really the #1 go-to in that spot. But it looks like still, even with the added stats on board, that Hemlock is going to be able to pick this apart fairly effectively. And this is what I was talking about, right? Like, sometimes this is just how Conquest is. Like, I'm gassing up Mech Rogue as a deck because of how I feel it's positioned against one kind of lineup that people might bring. But suddenly, if it runs into this kind of spot, it cannot compete with this level of power that Naga Demon Hunter can throw out on turn 4 in this instance, right? As long as this gets a relatively effective clear, which looks like it is going to do, you're just, how do you swing back against this now as the Mech Rogue?
Right, and that is one downside to a deck like this and some of these more kind of board-based aggressive decks that we're seeing, which is why we're also seeing a lot of people just banning the Paladin, right? Because the Paladin has that way of getting on the board and using things like the Showdown Prismatic Beam to kind of get that swing back clear on the other side. But the Mech Rogue doesn't have that ability. The top deck Bone Spike is pretty good to be able to clear up that sharpshooter. Is amazing pickup there, allows to at least kind of hope to stop the bleeding, but also the second sharpshooter was picked up and there's still a lot of stats on the board for Hemlock as well.
Yeah, there's 2 Slither Spears left on the board as well, which is never going to be a good time.
I'm not throwing away my shot.
Thank you, Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, here we go. The second sharpshooter coming down. Not playing in on the Finley, playing all these other things to see what is drawn here. Is it a cheap spell? Nope, just the Naga because the spell was played, and unfortunately, not enough mana to play the Wayward Sage or the Desperado to be able to actually get the Predation for free either.
Yeah, awkward draw step, really. The Predation was drawn off the last Naga that was played from hand. Like, the mistake was played, and that drew the Predation off the Sharpshooter, so it didn't get discounted, so a little bit awkward overall. But you're not super worried about doing incredible Sharpshooter chains here. Like, that Sharpshooter just got played because it was the best tempo card in your hand, right? You play that, you play a couple of minions, you get a little bit of extra damage. Ideally, you would have had 2 shots go to the minion, and then it would be a lot cleaner to be able to deal with it, which has got a little bit awkward. But still, just, it was the strongest tempo turn that Hemlock was going to be able to achieve this turn, so it still seems like the correct thing to do.
Yeah. And I love Hemlock's kind of reaction there, which does maybe not the biggest like pop-off reaction, but almost that kind of double take of like, oh, wait. Nothing came out onto the board after I just cleared this. Oh, okay. There's just no hope at this point. Yeah. I was like, I mean, I respect the effort of trying, but at the same time that that was over, I think, a couple of turns ago.
Yeah, pretty miserable draw for the rogue in the end, as you said. Like keeping the 4-mana card and just like we've seen builds of Mech Rogue with and without that package in general, right? Like it's one of those decks where you do make your deck a little bit more inconsistent. But you spike the top end of your draws way more than you lower the bottom end of your draws. So overall, your win rate goes up. But sometimes you do just get those miserable draws where, yeah, okay, you've got Scourge Illusionist in your hand, you draw the Death Rattle, especially when you're playing so few Death Rattles, in this case just the Thunderbringer to try and make some magic happen with Neptulon and so on. And yeah, your opponent kills it, nothing gets drawn, they just sit and laugh at you because you've drawn your deck in the wrong order. And when that is paired with a very, very strong draw from the Naga Demon Hunter on the other side, you're going to have a very, very bad time in what is a pretty tricky matchup at the best of times. Because even really, if Hemlock had to chew through the Thunderbringer taunt that turn, that was pretty straightforward to do there anyway, right? Like, okay, cool, they then spawn the Neptulon, you ignore it, you go face, you kill them, you know? Like, that would have worked out fine in the end anyway, so I think that draw from the Naga Demon Hunter would have ended up beating most draws from that Mech Rogue, and unfortunately for Gyu, just did not quite get anything going in that early game, really, despite the draw of the Spark Bots bailing him out just a little bit in the mid-game.
Yeah, there was like a maybe one or two turn hope there with drawing those, but yeah, just didn't end up being enough. I'm very curious as well. The Demon Hunter was one that we kind of talked about along with this Nature Shaman that we're now seeing Hemlock bring in. Those two decks did seem to struggle a bit yesterday, and even though it feels like we just saw a powerful Demon Hunter showing in that game, I think also it did do well, it did draw well, as you mentioned, but it also was just a lot of kind of sufferable, really not handing out draws on the other side as well. So is it going to happen again this game? I don't know. This hand looks much better for Gyu in terms of trying to kind of get his game plan going. There's some added bots, as you mentioned, from the scrap heap. There is some draw potential. The Snoop finally showing up. He can get some coins to get a little bit more value on the board and start pushing a lot of that damage quickly. But also on the other side, Hemlock has the fish.
Yeah, Totem on 2, though, not removing the first mech with the Piranhas. I was going to talk about this. Like, the draw of mech into Coin Squirrel is huge. It's one of the best openings that the Mech Rogue has access to. And Shaman doesn't really interact with that particularly apart from the card schooling. And that's true of so many things. And I see so many people, if you look at like tracking data for Nature Shaman, you'll see like this list with 1 or 2 cards different, sometimes an Overdraft, sometimes a Radiant, sometimes a Thorium, like those 3 cards sort of rotating around, but the core of this list. And then you'll see various other lists where people just really work hard to want to cut schooling from the deck, and I don't understand why. It's such a uniquely purposed card for solving problems that you don't have answers to otherwise in the deck. So as soon as I saw the schooling there, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Schooling to clear up the mech, but actually Hemlock taking it a little bit slower and saying, no, you know what? You can actually buff that first mech a little bit, and I still have 6 powers worth of fish in my hand that I can take it out after you've committed some of the magnetic minions to it, which is a very brave line to take from Hemlock, but I think something that might just end up working out here.
Yeah. Now we see the next Discover choice as well. Another interesting one. Does he want to go for some board presence with the Feral Spirits? Turn the Tides can help with kind of removing that as well, which Turn the Tides is another interesting one to clear up some of these minions and save those Piranhas to continue, as you were mentioning. But I do like the choice to just go for a future setup of I'm probably going to be committing these Piranhas to clearing, especially being able to play multiple of them in one turn. So I will need some sort of follow-up to actually commit and put my own things on the board for when I have my big pop-off turn.
And the stealth train has begun, and I think that's part of the reasoning behind that Feral Spirit as well, where personally, I think Sight Unseen against an average Mech Rogue hand, I would rather have the rushing 3-3 over the taunting 2-3s, because you want to kill their mechs, you don't just want to put things in the way, right? Because that then allows them to attach Wind Fury and coins and stealth and stuff to leave on the board. You want to remove that board so they don't have that base of magnetics, which makes the rush better. But I think Hemlock looked at this situation and went 2 Spark Bots in hand. haven't seen a spider yet, pretty good chance that I'm seeing stealth come out on the following turn, in which case having just blockers in the way to prevent massive face damage is going to be more useful to me than a rush minion.
Yeah. But now Hemlock is in the spot where, okay, he did see that stealth. Is he committing the taunts here? It definitely seems reasonable, but I think the question is, does he want to be overloaded going into next turn? What's his plan for next turn? Because if he's overloaded and he doesn't have enough to commit some of these, he's going to have to play the Thorum. I'm not sure if that's what he wants to do quite yet. But he does have a lot of low-cost minions that he can just fill in next turn. This is the kind of draw, these are the kind of hands that you want as Mech Rogue.
So, you being responsible here, of course, this is the World Championship, this is a decider, this is an elimination game, his entire year's worth of work is on the line. Me, I see an innie, I play an innie. Okay, no, Gyu's going to hold it back.
Well, he doesn't have the mana for it yet. He's only on 4
he does.
mana.
There's a coin in the attack, right? There's a squirrel on the thing. So you could have attacked, played the thing, made the copy with the innie, gone from there.
I do wonder if he also wants to just keep it stealthed. And I don't know, because if he plays the innie, he doesn't get the stealth as well.
True. Yeah, no, that's very fair. Well, no, that's actually... No, because you're copying... You then have Wind Fury Rush on a thing that also has coins, right? So you then have more coins available to be able to play the stealth spot bot at the end. So I think you could do it all. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
Wait, it's not even Bob! Oh my god, the Battlegrounds player again. Everyone's just called Bob now. Anyone that talks to you in Hearthstone is named Bob now.
That's right.
That's just how it works.
It's all Bob.
Yeah. Shut up, Raven. Raven's slating me for that now. And fair enough.
It's also very interesting watching this game. Both of these players are playing kind of very slowly. They're very reserved. They're really thinking through a lot of these lines. Even if it seems straightforward, they're taking their time. As you mentioned again, this is that deciders match. If they don't win these games, that's it. That's the end of their world championship, play. So they are really looking to make the best decisions, really thinking through these lines. And we saw a lot of the opposite yesterday, I almost feel like. Yesterday there was so much very fast play from a lot of players. And we might see that come in later. But here we go. Now the innie is going to come down, going to clear up with the rush. Now going to clear up the taunts. And this allows you to be able to push the other minion that he buffed up last turn all into face if he wants to.
Yeah, and that's the merit of doing it this way, right? Like, again, I am in favor of just jamming the innie on the previous turn using the coin. But by doing it this way, you do preserve stealth, as you were talking about. And then that means you then use this rush minion to completely take out these two taunts, whereas the other way around, you'd have to attack into one of the minions first, right? And then you wouldn't be able to send this damage phase. And then you have triple coin to be able to then jam the stealth on presumably the Wind Fury minion that you want to protect, which is solo lethal. So there is significant merit to doing it this way. And as I said, these are the things that you have to think about. Whereas me playing on ladder, see an innie, play an innie, it's as simple as that. Reflexes is the card! Oh, it's Hex, but it's not Primordial Wave, which is the absolute nuts. All of this magnetization onto 1-drops in this position. So Primordial would have been the nuts, and there's not even a rebuy. There's nothing cheap enough that you can play.
And this is also potentially one of those punishes, as we've seen the board just stay there for Gyu, and not only stay on board, but also get larger over these last few turns for Hemlock not going in early to just clear out that first mech that landed on the board.
Yeah, fish still in hand. Yes, it's a great point. It's worth pointing out. That original Click Clocker could have been dealt with on turn 2, which which means no magnetization, which then means no squirrel, which then means no innie, which then means no stealth. Like, mech rogue snowballs, that is really what it does, and certainly my style of playing against this deck is see a mech, kill a mech by basically any means necessary.
It's it's good logic, and for good reason. We're seeing the reasoning right here. But additional taunts on the board for Hemlock. There's still more taunts in hand as well if Hemlock isn't able to do one of his big OTK turns, which are these taunts going to be enough, though?
Prep pit stop first, right, for Titan? Because Titan is lethal a lot of the time here. And then you can gear shift if you don't hit it. I think that's the right order. It's actually a tough turn. The prep coming into hand opened up several different possibilities to get this lethal.
Yeah. There it is. We are going to see the prep into the gear shift. Will he be able to find it?
Shift? Okay. Okay.
Oh, I see arrows flying.
Oh, bone slide!
All right.
All right.
Yep. That'll work.
So yeah, Bone Spike was there. Some sort of way to generate Rush Sparkbot would have been great as well. I think Titan with the 4 damage hitting 2 mechs was lethal most of the time as well. There was a lot of different outs that you could look for, and a lot of combinations of where you use the prep and which card gets shuffled back into your hand with the gear shift and so on that had an effect on that. So it's just one of those probability calculations that you have to run that I don't think anyone necessarily gets 100% accurate while playing a game of Hearthstone. Like, I'm pretty good at mental probability calculations. I'm sure there are people better than me, but in spots like that, you sort of pretend you know, right? You're like, oh, this is definitely the best odds, and you just play it. But if someone asked you what the actual number was, you wouldn't have a clue, right? It's just kind of a vibe thing of what you feel is the most likely out in those scenarios. You picked one, you committed to it, hit the Bone Spike, more than good enough to get over the line there. But I think bigger questions than that last turn, the one turn earlier innie, which was a possibility, which I think I presented the arguments for and against, but also the choice just not to use the fish, which ended up getting fully stranded in hand for Hemlock and not really having any impact on the game at all.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you, though. I feel like just committing those fish early, trying to keep the rogue off of the board as quickly and as consistently as you can, especially when that's kind of their whole game plan, right? If they can ever stick a board, you don't even need to necessarily have a big turn where you push a ton of damage. Just kind of keep them off the board for a bit. But on the other side, the other argument is because of the kind of variation in the deck list for the mech rogue that you mentioned, there is actually that top end. So even if Hemlock were able to kind of come in and say, okay, I'm just going to keep your board clear, because of the deck build, it's a little bit different than what we've seen in the past with the kind of topping out at like 6 mana. So we'll see if that impacts the series overall, but this time Hemlock bringing in the mage. Hemlock has not like stayed with these decks. He's kind of switching off. Oh, the shaman didn't work. Okay, I'm going to bring in this mage now because I know Gyu has the shaman on the other side.
Yeah, he's gone Demon Hunter, then Demon Hunter again, then had to switch because the Demon Hunter won, so was on Shaman and has now switched to Mage. So it has been a good amount of variation in his queues throughout the series so far. But we now see the flip side of this, schooling in opening hand again for Gyu on the other side as well. But this is a matchup that I became intimately familiar with. I played an absolute ton of Nature Shaman when it was first released. During the time when the build was very, very contested on, I ended up making one small card change to the deck, which then has kind of evolved into what is this standard version of the deck that we see now. But during that time, if you queued ladder at High Legend, you probably played some form of Nature Shaman versus Rainbow Mage at some point. So this is a matchup I have played an enormous amount of times, and it's one of those matchups that I think is tight enough where whichever side of it you have more experience with, you feel is favored. A lot of matches are like that at high level in competitive Hearthstone, because there is so much skill expression in a lot of these decks. We're like, okay, well, if I've played like 300 games of Rainbow Mage, then I feel like it's favored against most things, right? Because I'm sick at that deck at that point. So I think it is close enough between these two decks that that is kind of where we are.
We didn't see Hemlock play the Piranhas in the last game, but Q is going to go in on them here. And notably also did get both Miracle Salesmen already, plus Schooling, and now has the second Schooling in hand. So this hand is kind of building up to just be a bit of this early tempo. That Hemlock picking up the Cosmic Keyboard. Kind of interesting as well to get to pick that up. I think, was that what he picked off of a Discover? Or did he take that Prismatic?
I'm not sure,
last
actually. I was
turn.
too busy talking about matchup stuff on the previous turn to actually see what happened on Hemlock's turn. But it's very annoying to have come on turn 3 instead of turn 2, I can tell you that
Yes.
much. Because if it was equipped last turn, it would have been Coin Cold Case, which is the absolute dream here. But as it stands, Hemlock is going to have to withstand a little bit of pressure, which is very irritating. Like, this is actually what Mage does to most other decks these days, right? Is it just plays these irritating 1 and 2 drops and just chips away with 6 to 8 damage at the start of the game, and then follows that up with the little burst combo, whereas Nature Shaman, Gyu on Nature Shaman, really pulling a little bit of anything you can do, I can do better right now. And Ancestral into Flow Rider is very, very nice for keeping this ongoing.
Into a Reflexes as well?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I was actually going to mention before he drew into the Ancestral Knowledge that even though he did have that aggressive kind of early start, he didn't really have a lot going on in his current hand and was probably going to have to rely on the tradable effect of those snake oils from Miracle Salesman. But you trust. You just trust he knows what he's doing. He's just going to draw into the good things.
Okay, so I was going to say, apologies, this may get a little deep. So, without the draw of the Flow Rider on this turn, I was about to advocate you could just open the Lightning Reflexes and look for a Flash of Lightning, right? Because the rest of your hand is so bursty. But now hitting the Flow Rider, you're now being offered that Flash of Lightning entirely naturally, so you have to then look at your hand and go, okay, I get to have Flash of Lightning next turn, and then under the Flash I have an entire Lightning Reflexes, I do have a Bioluminescence, I have some cheap minions, I have a 0 mana Lightning Bolt, and I have a Crash, which is definitely going to get down to 0 mana as well. The problem with that is because your opponent played exactly Keyboard Cold Case over the last 2 turns, you're not necessarily going to be preserving this entire board state, right? Whereas if they had not gone with the Cold Case, you'd actually feel relatively confident outside of the mech coming out from the mage that you'd actually get to keep a couple of these minions maybe, and that would be immediate lethal on the following turn. I still think it's the pick, and it is what Gyu's gone for, and actually finding Feral Spirits off it is a really, really nice pick up here for that extra minion base. Hemlock might be in trouble.
Yeah, and I was going to say as well, I think if it is the pick, you absolutely just want to play it in that case as well. Like you pick it, you play it the same turn, which is what he went for. And he's got the cards to kind of go in on a big turn if he wants to next turn. But as you mentioned, it's going to depend here on how much of this changes on the side for Hemlock as well. Crescendo?
Crescendo kind of huge, actually. Without some sort of clearing power, you need both skeleton shots to hit minions with the trades to be able to clear this up, unless you want to use the 4/4 to trade as well, which ideally I think you'd like to send some of that damage phase. Uh-oh.
Bask in my radiance.
Crescendo again? No! Go away, we didn't want you the first time.
I think just going in on the trades of the skeletons, he just said, I don't really need to go in on the Crescendo. I can make these trades. And the Jazz base burned there. It's a little late almost at this point. Another Flash of Lightning and another... It's going to go for the Feral Spirits.
Yeah, you play that Feral instead of the Feral that you have in your hand already. None of these are extra damage. Okay, so this is your lot at this point. You can play 1 fish, you can have the spell damage, so +4 spell damage. Yeah, it's easy lethal. 2 snake oils.
Yeah.
Nature Shaman, good deck!
Yeah, especially with the added Miracle Salesman and getting to have additional 0-cost things that now have added spell damage. And that, again, we're seeing kind of the power of some of these, right? He was able to kind of get a lot of that early chip damage that you talked about with those Miracle Salesmen, and then finally just got to have some damage over the top. Didn't need to have a huge full board of minions that he gave the spell damage to. He only had 3 minions, and that was good enough.
Yeah, and the turn before, right, it's why I said you really had to keep an eye on that. It was really simplified by that second Flow Rider draw into the Flash. I think that made it a very simple 2-turn lethal setup to see. What would have been trickier, and I'd love to have seen it just to like test Gyu and see what he would have done in that kind of position, is not had that draw into the natural Flash and whether the reflexes would have been opened to look for that Flash. Because you saw on that turn, right, the actual cards from the Lightning Reflex did not really have any impact on that lethal. The Feral Spirit got played to look at the other card, but he already had a different Feral Spirit in his hand that he could have played anyway. The only thing the Lightning Reflexes ended up doing was discounting the crash over the course of the turn, which could have then ended up being relevant without it. But you can see here, 4 minions on board, right? That was the big deal. So as the Shaman player, you kind of sense your opponent is damned if they do and damned if they don't in that spot. Because if they don't kill the minions, sweet, 2 extra minions for me to jam my Bioluminescence on the following turn. If they do kill the minions, well, 2 of them are salesmen. So I'm just getting 0 amount of snake oils in my hand at the end of the turn, which are going to help me get the lethal anyway. So I think really smart spot there from Gyu to just say, yeah, this is almost always lethal. He got basically the worst case scenario off the reflexes. 0 damage and expensive cards that he had to pay mana for as well. And even through all that was able to get exact lethal with the 2 snake oils. So really, really clean performance from Gyu, and happy to see that as well because, as mentioned, 1 or 2 accusations of some shakiness on day 1. I think Gyu has been someone who's been a real credit to the circuit this year with the level of play that he's put in, the consistency of results that he's put in. I think Pocket has called him out as arguably like right under him in terms of overall performances so far in the year through the circuit. So really happy to see Gyu advancing through.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think a lot of us on the casting desk also very much like his lineup as well. So to see that good lineup from Gyu that we kind of all really like in combination with the just very solid, good plays seems like a good combination. And maybe we'll see him go all the way to the finals. But we're not quite there yet, so let's take a look at what we have coming up next. We did just see the Hemlock versus Gyu Group A decider, unfortunately meaning Hemlock done for this tournament. But next up, we're going to have the Group B decider between Meaty and CJ to see which of them will be done in the tournament and which one will move into the top 4.
Yeah, or as TJ put it earlier, meat! That's what we've got coming up. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one for sure for both of these players. They're both great players. CJ Kaka has to kind of put behind him everything that happened. Hopefully he was able to get a good night's rest previously, but we are about to see well, a lot of people, we talked about how we like this lineup from Gyu, but I think overall the vibe is that Meaty and Pocket Train have the best lineup in the tournament overall, so we're about to see that come into play and see how it feels going up against a slightly different challenge with CJ Kaka as well. But I think you are right to point out, and we should highlight it a little bit more just before we move on and go to that next series. Just say goodbye properly to Hemlock, of course, because he has just been eliminated. These first 2 matches that you'll see today are elimination matches, and again, every player that got here has achieved a level of consistency and dedication and hard work and ability that very few people have ever achieved in competitive Hearthstone. This is one of the most taxing competitive systems we've ever had, and for a player to make it this far, make it to the World Championships, and then, you know, crash out early on in the tournament, it's not what they would have been looking for. But I think each and every one of these players, Hemlock absolutely included, have been a credit to the system this year and a credit to Hearthstone this year. So well done to Hemlock. We will be you will be missed in the remainder of this tournament for sure.
Yes, I completely agree. Well said. And as you mentioned, we are going to be getting into that next match. But before we do that, we're going to get everything set up. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back for that Group B decider match.